Okay. So people these days talk about Web 2.0, rich internet applications and stuff. What do they exactly mean by that? What they mean is, I mean, there are from the very beginning, there has been a strong push on making your web applications look rich, just like your client-server applications. So there have been a number of technologies that have been built in this regard, and I don't know if you guys have heard, but you guys know Flash, right? Most of you might have used Flash because those plugins are used for watching videos and doing some animations and stuff. Flash, I mean, you can generate Flash plugins using the Adobe editor, but it was not programmable. So Adobe came up with a programming, I mean, they internally, whatever they internally use, they export for developers, the API, to create those Flash plugins, and it was called as Adobe Flex. And using Adobe Flex as the engine, you could really build rich interactive applications. Similar to Adobe Flex, Microsoft came up with what is called as Silverlight, using which you can build rich applications. Most of you might not be familiar, but let's go to this website, Netflix. So if you go to Netflix and try to watch any movie, so within Netflix, what is loading here is essentially a Silverlight plugin. So using which it's able to stream the content. Silverlight is also used in web applications itself to give, I mean, in regular form-based applications like the example that I've shown you, but using this technologies like Silverlight and Flash, people were building rich interactive applications. I'll give you another example. I don't know if you guys have heard about Google Web Toolkit or GWT. I'll give you a simple demo of a GWT application. If you look at this application, I am talking about rich applications, right? What do I mean by that? I showed you a login page which looks very primitive like this. The same login page, if you look here, it looks very slick, and even from a performance perspective, it looks better. Not the login, but some of the other components. So for generating this UI, they used a framework called as GWT, and what it is essentially doing is generating JavaScript code to provide this look and feel. So if you look at this particular page here, all you will see that there will be no in the HTML body, there will be no content at all. All you will be seeing is essentially just the scripts that it is using to provide you this look and feel. So whatever manipulation that we did earlier in the earlier example, when I clicked on login, I was manipulating this layer and displaying this information through JavaScript code. Same thing is being done to generate this. And using this standard frameworks, the advantage you have is, let's say I use Silverlight. I shouldn't be calling it a framework. They are custom plugins that run inside your browser. So Silverlight is a plugin, Flash or Flex comes with a plugin. Similarly for GWT, it doesn't rely on any plugins. It generates straight JavaScript code. You don't have to worry about cross-browser compatibility when you go with this standard plugins that are out there. So whether you're looking at IE or Firefox or Chrome, it exactly looks the same. And when I talk about rich applications, visually good look and feel. So as you see here, when this page loaded, there are multiple charts here, and you get this animation feel. So if you so this graph is evolving, and if I do a mouse over, it is essentially displaying the information pertaining to that. All of this is nothing but JavaScript code. using which this application is being made to look better. Prior to HTML5 and CSS, doing this would require zillions of lines of code, and even with that effort, I don't think you would be able to achieve the rich look and feel that you are currently seeing. So with the advent of Web 2.0, Web 2.0 is essentially HTML5, and for CSS, which means cascading style sheets, the specification went from 2.0 to 3.0, which introduced some new elements, some new styling features, which gives us the ability to build this rich applications. But even with HTML5 and CSS, a majority of this rich look and feel is essentially enabled because of JavaScript. And earlier you had to create the JavaScript from scratch on your own, but now using frameworks like JQuery or Prototype.js or Bootstrap.js or Ext.js, all of these are frameworks that are built on JavaScript library. You don't need to do a whole bunch of this programming. In fact, probably towards the end of the 2 or 3 sessions we plan to take, I will have you do some simple examples using which you can generate some neat UI like what you are currently seeing. So this is what we mean by rich internet applications. I'm not talking about the primitive applications like the example that we did. I'm talking about rich applications like this. So earlier, if you have to build this rich application, you had to rely on Adobe Flex or Silverlight. Silverlight was a late entrant, and these days people are using Google Web Toolkit, which is the demo that I did earlier. So with the advent of Web 2.0, using technologies like HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript frameworks, we are able to get this rich look and feel. One of these standards that we have to understand is whenever you are presenting some information, you need to be able to retrieve data, or if you're building a web application, I need to be able to retrieve data or post data back to the server, either synchronously or asynchronously. By synchronously, I mean I'm waiting for the server to send me all the information, and I'm seeing it at a single shot. In case of the earlier example that we have seen for Yahoo, this was happening asynchronously. So if you looked at Yahoo Finance, it is going and retrieving this information. It's supposed to display here. So this is going and retrieving this information asynchronously in the background and overlaying the UI on top of your current HTML text out there. So, and this is made possible using your JavaScript. So a big piece of making your applications rich is using JavaScript, and writing the JavaScript code from scratch is a very tedious and error-prone process. So you typically leverage some of the existing frameworks like jQuery, Ext.js, and stuff. We will look into the pros and cons, essentially why we should be using jQuery when you can do it with straight JavaScript. We'll demonstrate it through a few examples. But another thing that you would need to definitely understand is whenever there is exchange of data, earlier we used to exchange data in the form of XML. So if I have to return a list of companies whose stocks are being traded in the stock exchange, starting with whatever I typed in, I would send the stock ticker symbol and then the name of the company and the index on which it is being traded on. So for a single object, I'm sending a whole bunch of information, and typically you used to send this information as XML, and when you exchange the information as XML using AJAX, your JavaScript code used to parse this XML in order to display that data on the page. Parsing XML is much more expensive than parsing JSON data. JSON is nothing but, it stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it is a means to show your data so that your JavaScript easily understands. And it is lightweight compared to the XML data. When I say lightweight, let's say I want to send 100 users information. That entire text file might take, let's say, 2 kilobytes or 3 kilobytes in size. If I send it as JSON data, I might be able to send it in smaller size, because of I don't need all those redundant HTML tags like first name, last name, and all of that, because we're going with kind of a cryptic notation. And two, your browsers have been coded so that they can process this data format if it comes in JSON quickly compared to XML. And that is the reason why JSON has become the industry standard now, and going forward you'll see heavy usage of JSON compared to XML. Even in case of Salesforce, if you are doing any integration work, when you implement your RESTful services, all of the data exchange is happening in JSON format. If you have to do it in XML, you have to code it separately. But JSON is the default or the de facto standard for exchanging information. I'll show you a few examples of what we mean by representing data in JSON. Lastly, we'll just talk about what RESTful services are. So Rani, you had a question earlier where you said, why would my JavaScript code need to talk to the server? When it talks to the server, it is interested in retrieving some information like the stock quotes example that I showed you. And it is not essentially interested in retrieving a piece of HTML code from the server. It is interested in getting the data and then presenting it however it needs to. So if you want your applications to share data with the external world, you typically expose that data by implementing web services. Earlier, people used to implement web services using the standard specification, which was called as SOAP, which was again XML based, which is heavy weight. Compared to SOAP, RESTful services are HTTP based. It's a HTTP based application, RESTful services, and it uses the standard methods like get, put, delete that I showed you earlier. And instead of implementing it as a SOAP-based service, you implement it as a RESTful service. But the RESTful service is essentially consuming or producing data by default in JSON format. If it has to do it in XML, it can. But typically, the idea of RESTful services is to expose your application either to consume or to give away information from your application. So if you're working in Salesforce, if some external application wants to periodically retrieve some information from Salesforce instead of from the UI, if it wants to retrieve it from the backend, in Salesforce, you can create your Apex classes as RESTful services. If you expose this information as a RESTful service, like say all the contacts that are there for a particular organization, if it has to be updated in some database periodically, I can just write or consume that data using by invoking the RESTful services that Salesforce exposes and consuming that information. I'll show you a few examples for each of those topics, so you'll have a better understanding of what they are. So as part of, everybody talks about HTML5. So as part of HTML5, the biggest changes that have been done are some of the things that I've highlighted here. In HTML, with HTML5, you have something called as web workers, which are nothing but you can have your code run in the background. I mean, you had that capability earlier also, but all of it used to run within the current. It was not truly multi-threaded with the XML HTTP request object and other things that were given earlier. But with HTML5, I can instruct the browser to run certain chunks of code in separate threads. So because of that, you can generate this rich look and feel. So I was demoing this site earlier. So I have separate threads processing this particular piece of this particular section of the page versus this section of the page. So when the page is redrawing itself for this graph, in this section, in the top section, it was also simultaneously doing it in the bottom section. So that is why you get that. I was able to simultaneously show both of those graphs refreshing because of the background threads feature that is available with HTML5. Without that, you would be able to achieve it, but it wouldn't be as smooth as it is right now. It introduced new HTML tags using which you can essentially embed and play videos. So now all the newer browsers, IE 9 or IE 10 and above, would be able to display videos if you reference them using this video elements. It also has introduced what is called as a canvas, using which you can create graphics on the fly using your JavaScript and HTML5 elements. The biggest change besides this background threads or web workers is with HTML5 you can write to local storage. Earlier from your web application, if you want to save some information on the client's browser, you could do it in the form of only what is called as cookies. So let's say you log into your banking site and after you log out, let's say after a few days you try to log into the site again, you will see that your login ID is automatically populated. The reason why it is populated is because the last time you logged in, application using JavaScript has written some cookies on your machine, which is being accessed subsequently. So whatever information that you could persist earlier was primarily text information in the form of cookies. But with HTML5, I can allocate local storage. So within the browser, I can cache data, or if I want to create some temporary files and stuff, I would be able to do it without breaking any security restrictions. Because of which, if you are dealing with large data chunks, like here in this case, this particular grid that I'm showing has quite a bunch of data. So when I'm retrieving this data, if you want any of this information to be cached for subsequent sessions, I can do that by persisting it onto your local storage. By default, it allows you to save around 5 MB of data, and in any format that you want to locally, and access it again through the application. So that has been one big advantage or one big step forward with HTML5. Besides that, these days everybody is focused on this geolocation feature. So these features were there in Google Maps and all your other software. So using which you can now use standard HTML tags to define the locations or to provide those kind of features within your web pages. From your Visual Force and Apex perspective, I don't think you would need to be concerned about any of these features. If you are an advanced Visual Force developer, one thing that you might be interested in is leveraging the local storage capabilities that are offered with HTML5, using which you can display the information or store the information for on the user's machine. I'll give you a simple example. We have implemented a website for a non-for-profit organization which archives journals, and they have around 1 million articles that are there on the server. They have asked us to implement the application so that when a user logs in the very first page, we display all the journals that they are currently archiving, and there were around 30,000 journals that were there. So if you have to scroll, if I have to display all the 30,000 journal information in one single shot, the browser was typically taking around more than a minute to do it. But because of HTML5 feature, what we did was the first time the user logs in, it would take them a long time, but subsequently we would have cached the data because this information wouldn't change so frequently. So if the user visits the site a second time, since we are not doing a round trip to the server, we essentially loaded the data almost immediately within less than 3 seconds or 4 seconds. So you can leverage this kind of features to make your applications perform better. The background worker threads is something that you can leverage, and those two are probably the features that you would use. We went to Dreamforce and we saw quite a few companies showcasing the ability to integrate your CRM with maps, and for that you would use this. You could use this geolocation. I'm not saying that they have done that, but you could use some of these geolocation features that are available with HTML5. We spoke about JavaScript till now, and the purpose of these sessions is primarily to dig deep into JQuery. So JQuery is just a library that is built on top of JavaScript. So instead of you writing a whole bunch of code, you can essentially, by leveraging this library, you can write it with probably a single line of code. So an example would be, let's say, if I want to, with a single click of a button, I want to be able to select all the radio buttons or all the checkboxes in a particular page. If you have to write it in JavaScript, I have to write some 7 or 8 lines of code to loop through all the elements in the page. If the element is a checkbox, then mark that value to true, and that code would require some 6 or 7 lines of code. If I do the same thing with jQuery, I could achieve the same functionality with a single line of code. So jQuery is no magic. It is no separate language by itself. It is just a JavaScript library. What is the purpose of including a library in any of your programming languages, whether it be your C# or Java or C++? The idea is some of the functions are already pre-built for you. You would be leveraging those pre-built functions that are already there for you. So jQuery is just a JavaScript library, and if you go to jQuery.com, you can download the library, and you do also have some examples on jQuery there. In order to use jQuery in your application or in your pages, you would need to include, you can either download the JavaScript file from the jQuery.com website and put it on your server, or you can also include it from some public websites that also host it. We can go into those details in a little while. But jQuery is essentially just a library that you can use for building some sophisticated functions. In fact, most of the examples or most of the new frameworks out there leverage jQuery quite a bit. Based on jQuery itself, the same team build a bunch of widgets. What do I mean by widgets? You're talking about your input elements like drop-down buttons and stuff. This is a widget. This table that you see here with this alternate coloring, it's simple grid widget. Similarly, for this kind of tabs kind of a feature, there are some widgets called as panels, so that the information is refreshed within a page or within a particular container. So if you go to jQuery.com, this is the place where you can download the library from, and when you download, what you're essentially downloading are a bunch of JavaScript files. That's all it is. You're not downloading anything else. Here, jQuery 1.11 is the current version. There is jQuery 2 also that has been released. So you can either download 2.1 or 1.11, and you'll see that applications are using different versions of jQuery. They are forward compatible, so you don't need to worry about anything. If you go to jQuery UI, you can leverage some of these if you want to. So if you go to jQuery UI, these are some of the widgets. So let's say if you want to display dialog boxes. So here within this page, I want to display a dialog box more like an alert with animation. If I click on animation, you'll see. Okay, good. And this is what I meant by rich internet applications. Features which would require quite a bit of coding earlier can be done easily. This is modal box. So by modal, we mean we cannot modify the text in the background. You would have to close it in order to be able to modify the text in the background. So you have a whole bunch of widgets like this. I would like you guys to take a look at it after today's session. We'll be leveraging all of this in order to build some examples, and I'm 100% sure that will make you comfortable at least with JQuery by the end of this session. And you would definitely need to practice. Listening to me is not going to help. We'll do some examples together, and you can try some on your own to understand the difference. But the primary difference between jQuery and jQuery UI is jQuery UI is built on jQuery, and these are a bunch of widgets that have already been built for you. jQuery library is the core library using which you can program whatever you need to that is available in the library. So as I was telling you earlier, jQuery takes your common tasks and wraps it up so that some of the repetitive or some of the things that are accomplished with tons of lines of code is accomplished in a relatively simpler fashion. In order to invoke the jQuery libraries in your code, you would use this $sign or the jQuery text like I have typed here. And again, we'll do examples to see how that works. Why do we use jQuery? These are the reasons why we want to use jQuery. HTML and DOM manipulation. What do I mean by that? In the earlier example that I showed you, using the browser's object model, we are able to insert HTML that was not there in the page earlier. So going back to our login page example, when the page initially loads, there is no HTML containing this information. And without submitting the page to the server side, I was able to generate this code and insert this particular HTML dynamically. So we are manipulating using this, manipulating the page using the browser's object model. That is what we mean by DOM manipulation. So you can still do that with JavaScript, but doing it with jQuery makes it much easier. CSS manipulation, if you want to change the styling information on a particular element, you can do it with jQuery easily. Everything that you can do it with jQuery, you can also do it with JavaScript, but it just takes additional lines of code and complexity because you need to make sure that your code works across all the different types of browsers. All the cross-browser compatibility and that multiple lines of code is made easy for you by using jQuery. HTML event methods. Using jQuery, you can respond to your standard HTML events like button clicks, mouse overs, key press events, whatever event model that is supported in your browser. Those events can be handled using jQuery. We'll be doing examples on all of this, so you would understand firsthand how we would do it. Effects and animations, if I'll show you probably a simple example. And a good reference after we are done with these sessions is go to w3schools.com and you have a quick introduction to jQuery here. I want to do a simple example. So as you can see here, clicking on it, expanding and hiding it, and it is done with just one line of code. So you can do animation and other things using jQuery. AJAX is what we discussed earlier. How do I send or retrieve information from the server using JavaScript and then present it to the user? AJAX stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. That XML part has kind of become moot now because more or less you exchange data in the form of JSON and not XML. And your jQuery library also exposes quite a few utility functions. By utility, I mean if you want to trim spaces in a string or convert date into a particular format or parse XML or parse JSON strings, it provides some utility methods using which you can do all of those. So jQuery is essentially a library which allows the look and feel to be manipulated in a web page, uh, additional data being presented in the web page, or the content in the existing page itself being modified. So it allows you to deal with the content that is being displayed in the web page. You can perform animations, you can respond to events, and you can also, it also supports your communication with your backend using Ajax. It also provides a bunch of utility functions. Again, jQuery is, you don't need to remember all the functions that are there. What you need to know is the high-level capabilities, and you can always reference some of those examples to implement whatever it is needed. But the idea is, let's say, I mean, we implemented, I was talking to you about this project at Novartis. Users were not happy with the look and feel that was generated out of box. jQuery is meant to be it's a non-obtrusive JavaScript. By non-obtrusive JavaScript mean that after the page has been generated, I can go ahead and modify how the page looks and feels. So Salesforce might generate the UI in a particular way, but once the page is loaded, using additional code in a Visualforce page, I can go ahead and modify the page to make it look different. Like, let's say the users were not happy with the fonts that are displayed in a drop-down list. We can easily go ahead and modify the style sheet that is applied on the drop-down box once the page loads using the event methods and some of the out-of-box jQuery functions. Any questions on jQuery? We'll be spending quite a bit of time on jQuery, so as long as you understand that it is just a library, it's not a separate language on its own, that's all I want you to at this particular point of time. We have been talking about JSON all along. I want to introduce it now itself because I want to do some examples where you are talking about real world applications. I don't want to do some simple jazzy animations and things like that which are of no use to you. I want to do some real world examples, and when you are integrating applications using jQuery, typically there is exchange of data involved. And when there is exchange of data involved, more often than not, you are working with data being exchanged in the form of JSON. So I wanted to introduce that in this session here, so that you're not worried about it when you have to really work with it. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and this JSON notation is recognized by JavaScript in all browser windows, and it is also recognized by your server-side languages. Somebody asked me a question earlier in the day, how do I pass this information to the server? Once you pass this information as JSON data, even my server-side code, whether it be C# or Java or C++, should be able to understand the data that I've sent in order to work with it. So all your server-side languages do support JSON data. When I say do support JSON data, they have the ability to parse JSON data and work with it, just like they have the ability to work with XML. I was telling you earlier, when you pass information as JSON, the reason why it is preferred is it is lightweight compared to XML. We were talking about the footprints. If I pass in an information as XML versus passing information as JSON, the size of the data is going to be less. And since you're going to exchange the data out there on the internet, smaller data will obviously take lesser time to transmit compared to larger data. That is another reason why you want to use JSON. JSON, I don't want to go into the details, but in JSON, for an object, in order to list its attributes, it's usually listed as a name-value pairs, just like your set objects that you work with in Apex. JSON, using JSON, you can define an array using square brackets. and the object is represented in curly braces. And I'll show you a simple example. If I have to exchange JSON data for a user, I want to pass the user's first name, last name, age, address, and phone numbers. And again, address itself is an object of its own, where I have the street address, city, state, and postal code. And phone numbers, I might have multiple numbers. I might have a home, cell, and a fax number. So in JSON, any object is represented using curly braces. So I have a curly brace at the beginning and I have a curly brace at the end. Within that, for an object, the properties are represented as name value pairs. So the property name here is first name, colon, and it has a value, then comma followed by the next property, followed by the next property. So the naming convention is your property name and then the property value with a colon sign. If one of the property values is an object itself, you can just put in curly braces for that particular object. So address is an object containing street, city, state, and postal code information. So I put in the curly brace here. So between two properties of an object, you just put in a comma. So phone numbers, I have an array of phone numbers. So array is always represented in square brackets, and each element, if it is an object, is represented in curly braces. So after each element, I would need to put a comma. So when you are passing information in JSON format, you need to remember this 3 or 4 things. One, object always starts with a curly brace, ends with a curly brace. Properties of an object are always represented as name value pairs. Here is the name of the property followed by the value, and each property is separated with a comma. Your object can contain other objects in it, and it can also contain arrays. If it is an array, you indicate the array in the form of this square brackets. I'll show you the same information being exchanged in XML format. So if I have to exchange the same data in XML, I would have put in a users element at the top. Under users, you would have had user, and then ID, first name, last name, and then this user tag would be closed. So this is how I would represent, simple representation in XML as elements. I haven't used any XML attributes here. The same thing if I have to represent it. So in JSON, I'm exchanging users information, and there is more than one user, so I'm exchanging the data as an array of elements. Array of elements starts with a square bracket that you see on the top. Each element in the array is an object, so I put in curly brace. And what is the data that I'm passing in? ID, first name, and last name. So when you exchange this data, this is less verbose compared to your XML, and that is why it is quick to transfer the data and quick to parse using JavaScript or your server-side languages. So what you guys need to understand is JSON is a different way of exchanging information. The representation itself is kind of cryptic. It more looks like JavaScript code than textual information that you typically have in XML. It's not descriptive like XML, but from a performance perspective, this is a better option. So that is why for two users records, you might not see that much of a difference. But when I'm exchanging, like say 10,000 users list, immediately the difference in my data size is going to be significant between JSON and XML. So that is the reason why you would be seeing that most of the data is exchanged in JSON format these days. We spoke about RESTful services earlier. RESTful services are also nothing but web services, but they are not based on SOAP protocol. They are based on HTTP methods or HTTP protocol. REST means representational state transfer, and it implements all your HTTP methods, get, post, delete, and all of that. When you implement a web service now, you will implement it as a RESTful service, exchanging JSON data. I wouldn't be spending any more time on that. Here I put in a simple example of what a RESTful service on the server side looks like. So if from my JavaScript code, let's say I want to call this method on the server side, you'll see that I'm supporting either get or post methods in my RESTful service. So as long as I pass in this URL and pass in the data, it essentially invokes this code on the server side and sends the response back to my code. I'll not be spending much time on this, but RESTful services are nothing but web services where you are exchanging data in JSON format. I put in some URLs that you can leverage to do more research on what these things are. I forgot to put in w3schools.com there. I mean, it is presented in a very simple fashion on W3 schools. So I would suggest going to that website to get a primer on either HTML, JavaScript, or JQuery. That being said, if you guys don't have any other questions, we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll jump into JQuery. Today I'll do a few examples in JQuery, and we'll continue probably tomorrow with remaining examples and discussion on JQuery. I'll be sharing these slides with you guys, so you can also take a look at it later. Any questions on JSON or RESTful services? Okay. So if you guys don't have any questions, it's around 4:42 right now. Let's meet at.
Vikram, there's just one question. So when you're using the RESTful APIs, is JSON is the only format the way you would exchange the data if you're using RESTful?
You would prefer to exchange in the JSON, Prasad, but it is not necessary. JSON is what is. JSON is not the only format supported. So using RESTful services, you can also exchange data in XML. But why would you do that if you can do it efficiently as JSON? That is the only reason why everybody is adopting JSON, purely performance reasons, other than the ability to support it. I mean, your RESTful service can exchange data in XML. I'll before I actually take a break, I'll show you an application that we have built using what we just spoke about, and that will give you an idea as to how you can make your application look rich. It essentially is retrieving all of this information from Salesforce, and subsequently when some processing is done here, it's also saving back information back into Salesforce. This application itself was implemented in .NET, but it leverages JQuery heavily. I mean, I'll show you a simple example here. When this page is initially loading, it is not getting the data for all of these drop-downs using Ajax. I was talking to you about Ajax earlier. After the page loads, individually I'm putting in a separate request to the web server to get this data and then to populate this data. And all of this is happening through jQuery and JavaScript. I was talking to you about the application having a rich look and feel. You see this data grid here. It by default has various features to filter the data once I have the data in here. And this is without me writing even a single line of code. I want to sort the data. I can sort it on any column that I want. And all of this is happening on the client side using jQuery as the library. I mean, without me writing much code for it. And I was showing you some modal dialog boxes earlier. So I was talking to you earlier about a simple example where if I click on this checkbox, I want to be able to select all the drop-downs. If I have to write standard JavaScript code, I have to write some 6 or 7 lines of code. It is done with a single line of code here. I'm selecting my mode of some values here, and it's automatically defaulting at the other place, like Yahoo suggestions and stuff. And I showed you jQuery modal dialog box. So what you see here is a modal dialog box that has been generated using jQuery. And in this modal dialog box, again, I have tabs and this text editor and a whole bunch of stuff. So you'll see that when I'm clicking on this tab, it is going and doing a round trip to the server and getting information only for this tab. The information that's already there in the other tab is not being refreshed every time I get it. So that is what we meant by AJAX. And all of this is made possible because my JQuery code is talking to web services in the backend and retrieving this particular information. And the application itself has a rich look and feel. As you can see, the styling in the application is pretty slick. And this is because we are using some of the widgets that were built on top of jQuery. We are using a framework called as Kendo UI framework, but that framework essentially is built on top of jQuery. And you should be able to build an application easily using jQuery UI looking like this. So we'll do some applications, some examples in that direction, but I mean, you should be able to relate it with some real-world examples. How do you fit in the context of Visualforce page? We will also try to see some examples where you can plug your jQuery libraries into existing Visualforce pages. Okay, so that being said, I'll revert back to my slides. Look, I have to switch machines here. I couldn't prepare many slides, so we will probably be doing some examples. I gave you a brief introduction to what jQuery is. It's essentially a library. I am going to highlight why jQuery is so popular and why people use it a lot. We were talking about this earlier, economy of code. What I mean by that is something that needs to be done with tens of lines of code in JavaScript can be done with a single line of code in jQuery. I'll do a simple example in that regard, but I'll show that to you in a minute. And the second reason why people use jQuery quite a bit is it is unobtrusive in nature. What do I mean by unobtrusive? If you go back to the login page that you coded earlier, we said that on this particular button, you have an on-click event, and upon on-click, you call this a particular function. Typically, your HTML content is not supposed to be having event handling related code. If I had to do it the right way, it's supposed to have been handled like this. So if I was using jQuery, I can just say dollar and say, we'll look at the jQuery syntax in a minute, and this button is the ID of the button is login, so btn login. So we'll say for the button, when you click on it, you have to call some function, right? You can just write it like this. So in here, you can do additional processing, or instead of this on login, I can put in this code here, or just call on login from there. Maybe, I mean, if I just had that button, I would have probably written my code like this. So after the page loads, you are defining events on existing objects. Besides introducing or having the ability to handle events associated with all the elements in your page, it can also change the styling information by updating the attributes. Right now, let's say I defined the text box size to be of to fit in 10 characters. Using JQuery, I can modify the styling information also very easily. The styling, by styling I mean even changing the standard attributes for your HTML elements from other than what have been defined. So this approach of not mixing your HTML content with event handling related code is the preferred way. You shouldn't mix your styling and event handling code as part of your HTML. The idea should be your styling should be handled in an unobtrusive manner, and even your look and feel should be handled in an unobtrusive manner. By unobtrusive, I mean I'm not defining the style of this body tag within this body element. Instead, I'm defining it in my style sheet. Similarly, the events that need to be handled for this button is not also defined in the HTML here. I'm handling it as part of my JavaScript. It's more of a design thing than design perspective than an issue with the actual code. Either way, your code is going to work perfectly fine. But from keeping it very modular and clean, if somebody has to look at all the events that are handled in your code, they don't need to go through your HTML and your scripting code in your JS file. Just by looking at the scripting code, I would be able to figure out what has happened. So that is that's what we mean by unobtrusive. Last thing, as I was telling you earlier, you want your structure of your HTML page to be cleanly separated out. By structure, I mean in a typical HTML page, when I talk about structure, there are three elements: the styling information, the behavior, and the actual content. So styling is should be handled through your style sheets. Behavior should be handled through your JavaScript, and that potentially includes your jQuery code and whatever other JavaScript that you write. And content should be just HTML without any event handling or styling information. Okay. So before we jump into the example, one quick introduction I want to give you is, in order to use a jQuery library, I told you to download the jQuery script file from the website. You can use any version. I mean, for there are minor differences between the different versions, but for the examples that you guys will be working on, any version will work fine. Try to download the latest version if you can. Some of the websites, what they do is they also, both Microsoft as well as Google, expose jQuery libraries from their websites. And if it is an internet site that has been built, people typically put in the URLs for the jQuery library, complete URLs to the Microsoft site or the Google site. The reason being, if you have a user in Japan who is accessing my web page that is hosted in US, if you have your JavaScript file hosted here in US, the file needs to be downloaded to Japan before the functions kick in. But in case if you reference this public URLs, Microsoft or Google's, they have these files across the entire network. So if it is a Japan user logging in, they might be downloading it from the Japanese site that Microsoft exposes for those downloads. But if you're developing intranet applications, you should just download the file locally and reference it from there. Once you have the file referenced in your code, you should, in order to invoke the jQuery functions, you would use the symbol $, or you can also type in jQuery, J lowercase and Q capital, rest of it in lowercase. So if you want to invoke anything, you either use $ or jQuery. Why would I not use $, which is more concise than jQuery? There are some other frameworks where dollar is used, like EXTJS is another JavaScript framework which uses dollar as a syntax to invoke its functions. And it is not uncommon to work with 2 or 3 different frameworks when you're building your applications. So you might be using JQuery and EXTJS and Prototype.js, all these different JavaScript libraries. So if there is a conflict in your code, then instead of using dollar sign, you can also use jQuery to invoke your functions. That is the only purpose of it. In jQuery, in order to work with any element, the common syntax is dollar should be starting, and the element that you want to be working on, you should have a mechanism to select it. So earlier I put in hash and then btn login ID. So that is a mechanism for identifying your elements by ID. There are other ways in which you can select your elements. We will see that. And with jQuery, you don't need to select a single element. You can, like say, change the style on 10 elements with 1 line of code. So in that case, this selector criteria, you're going to put in the criteria to select those 10 elements in your particular page, and it would automatically perform whatever action that you define in your code. The typical syntax is dollar in brackets, specify the selector criteria, and then after that, dot method or action that you want to perform on all those objects. jQuery also handles your standard events. There are some standard events like onload after the page loads. If you want, you can fire a piece of JavaScript, and that's a very common thing that that you typically do. So so you do have those kind of event handling functions. We'll look at that specific syntax in a bit. I wanted to do a simple example for this, illustrating this economy of code. So earlier we had this login page where you had user login. Besides the user ID and password, I want the user to enter the country from where he's logging in. And instead of the country being listed in a drop-down box, just for the sake of this example, I'll put it in a radio button. So what is the input element for representing radio buttons in your page? It is radio input element. Follow a decent, I mean, I'm not saying one way or the other, but whatever naming convention you follow, make it consistent throughout. I have the habit of putting in the element type prefix in the beginning, but if you just want to call it country, do it. But whatever it is, just be consistent with it. So value is an NBSP stands for a space in HTML. So I'm going to put in 2 or 3 countries here. And for a radio element, besides the ID and name property, there's also a group property. The reason for this group is so that you can select only one radio element at a time and not all of them. I want the user to select only one country. I'm going to modify the code to check what country value has been selected. So to retrieve the country value, I will write another function. In this JavaScript, so I'm going to say function get country selection. In JavaScript, in order to write a function, it always starts with function prefix. And if you want to return a value, just return the value. You don't need to define what data type it is, because scripting languages don't have data types like your regular programming languages or compiled languages. Okay, so I'll just, so what I'm doing is here I'm trying to retrieve the value. The first line of code I have here is I'm looping through all the elements that are of type input, and using the browser object model, I'm saying get elements by tag name. Again, this is not the only way to do it. There are 100 different ways to do it, even with regular JavaScript. I've taken this so that I can cover some other elements in the object model. Earlier we used get element by ID. Here I'm retrieving all elements that start with that are of type input. So in this case, you have a text box, you have a password, and 3 radio buttons. So I'm looping through all my elements. The elements that are returned is an array. In the case when I do document.get elements by name, I'm looping through all my elements, and I'm checking if that element type is a radio button. If the element type is a radio button and the element element name is country. Happy country is what? And the radio button has to be checked. Then I'm returning the selected value. So in order to return the value, I use a function return selected value. So this is my country list: USA, India, and Australia. So if I select log country, I think there must have been some error. It didn't fire. Since I copy pasted from PowerPoint, this instead of a single quote, it was an apostrophe. So
Vikram, even in the same get country selection, the name RD country, should that be in double quotes as well? Or the type in the get country selection? Radio, type radio.
no, get country selection is fine. Get country selection, this is how it should be. Where are you talking?
If element type equals to?
No, single quote or double quote, JavaScript doesn't care. No, I forgot to close that. Forgot to close the loop. So I said if this, and then I forgot to put in. So when you write your code, indent it properly so that you know if you are missing in some braces and stuff. JavaScript doesn't distinguish between a single quote and a double quote, Prasad, so you can use either. I think there are still some mistakes. I didn't misspelled anything, right? Yeah, get elements. There is a typo. ELEMENTS by tag name. That's why you should be using an editor. You shouldn't be doing it like I am right now. I'm putting in some debug statements. And this time it should work. Oh, okay. That event was not even getting fired because we took off. When you click on the button, we took out that code, so it was not firing. What? We closed everything, right? There was an extra.
After two variables login ID, there is no semicolon. Valid input function.
No, it doesn't matter. Okay, I think something else is happening on this.
There is an error on the.
Mm-hmm. Mm, okay. Let me open it up in some editor and take a look. Obviously there is a typo somewhere. Okay, I found the issue. There was an extra space, I think. Let me backtrack it a bit and I'll see where the issue is. So the issue is with the loop. Okay. Just give me 2 minutes. Obviously, we are missing something here. I'll correct this and.
Vikram.
Yeah.
Vikram.
Yeah. Who's this?
Is that get elements? This is Sunita.
Yeah, Sunita.
Is it get elements or is it get element?
No, get elements, because here you got the length, right? It says there are 6 elements in the page. Okay. And then I was able to do elements of 0.id, which was the first element, and it was getting in that.
Oh, okay, it came to here.
So I think it might be something that is the case. So it retrieves 6 elements, which is 2 input elements, 2 text boxes, and then the login button and 3 radio buttons, which is correct. It retrieved the third element, which was the country. So it's not. I'm just printing out all the element names. Okay, it's also working. Okay, I know why it didn't work. When you're doing comparisons, it should be double equal to, not a single equal to. Okay, let's see what happens. Yeah. Good. So that's the problem. If you don't work with IDEs, you write code from scratch, small textual errors. In this case, we missed this extra equal to, and that caused all the grief. So just to clean up the code and go back to where we were earlier. So in order to get the value in that country box, in the radio button, you will have to look through all the elements, and then you have to do your conditional check, and then if that radio button is selected, you check that by using the property dot check equal to true. Then you populate the value. So with this, now if I refresh and select, let's say, Australia, you'll see country selected as Australia, and you'll see those validation errors, right? So if I'm not using JQuery, I had to write this many lines of code, which is not much, but when you're writing complex applications, these things add up. What I was trying to do here was straightforward retrieve the value, but sometimes if you're trying to manipulate the UI, it might involve some complex JavaScript code. instead of all of this, if I have to do it with with JQuery, once I downloaded the library onto my machine, or once I reference it, all I had to do was just one line of code, and it would have retrieved the value for me. So here, if you if you see here, my syntax is dollar in brackets. I put in single quotes, and then I'm saying name equal to my radio button. So whatever I named my radio elements, which was RD country, and then I'm saying if it is checked, then get me the value for it. So using this would retrieve my the value with one line of code, and even from a performance perspective, this is much faster, the jQuery code, compared to the 4 or 5 lines of code that I wrote earlier, because it is looping through all these elements and then fetching it. jQuery optimizes this retrieval so that it is much faster. I told you earlier, in order to use the jQuery dollar functions, you will have to reference the library. Right now, I'm running this as a standalone file. I'm not running it on any web server. So the jQuery library might not load it properly, but if you put it on a web server, you should be able to. For some of you who are not familiar with any web development for now, you can either work with your Eclipse editor or Visual Studio. If you have Visual Studio, you don't need any other web server. But if you don't have, if you're not familiar with Visual Studio, then I would suggest downloading Tomcat onto your machine. And in the next class, I would just set up Tomcat locally. We can work with either of those to work on the jQuery examples. So instead of doing it everything from locally, we'll try to simulate a real-time environment. I also told you that you can include this. I probably didn't mention that. Yeah, I probably mentioned
Bikram,
it. Yeah.
Bikram, this is Sunita. I have Eclipse. Will that be good enough? Can I use
So Eclipse also, it looks for a local Tomcat instance. So you would need Tomcat, Sunita.
Okay.
Just having Eclipse is not adequate.
All right, all right.
Okay. So here I didn't download the JavaScript library yet, so I'm directly referencing it from this website, Google's website. All I did was including, there are 2 versions of the jQuery library. min.js includes the core functions. There's an all.js file which includes extraneous functions and stuff, and with comments and all of that. So min is supposed to have, they reduce the file size by getting rid of comments and everything. Even if you try to read the code, it wouldn't make any sense to us. It would be tough to understand what they are doing there. So including any version should be fine for your regular usage. So here, so I'm putting in both the pieces of code. jQuery also internally is using the same JavaScript functions, and some browsers doesn't recognize some method. So get elements by tag name. These days all browsers are recognizing it, but if you go back to Netscape browser, Netscape was prior to Firefox, it doesn't understand what get elements by tag name is. But so your code is not going to run in probably version 1 of version 5 of IE, or version older versions of Netscape, or get elements by tag name are always there in Firefox, but some other function might not work in the older version. when you use JQuery library, you are shielded from all of that, from the cross-browser compatibility issues. And it used to be a real nightmare making your applications work across all the browsers and all the platforms. Some code would run fine on IE and Windows. Some code wouldn't work on Safari running on a Mac, because Mac is obviously different and the browser there behaves slightly different and their object model is different. So you would be shielded from all of that stuff by using this libraries or frameworks. So as you can see here, country from JQuery code is USA. Did I copy? I didn't enter the correct. I just defined a different variable to distinguish the value retrieved from. So it didn't download the JQuery library. That is why it is retrieving the value as undefined. Once I put it on the web server, it should work fine. The reason why I got undefined is this JavaScript library is not yet downloaded. This JavaScript library that we are referencing is not downloaded in my browser. So here, instead of giving in the URL, I'll try to give in the actual. But once you put it on the web server, it will work fine. So for the next session, which will be tomorrow, I want you guys to either have Tomcat or Visual Studio, one of the two. And since you're working on Apex and Visual Force, you guys must be having an Eclipse IDE anyway on your machine. So we can work with the Eclipse IDE if you are working with Tomcat. Any questions? It might not also work. My computer might restrict it from accessing it directly, but we'll give it a try. No, it's not loading the library. Okay, I'll fix that. I mean, I have another machine set up for the demos, and I can do it both from Java as well as from .NET, from your Visual Studio stuff. So we'll try out that example, but the idea is this. Instead of multiple repetitive code, you can essentially accomplish everything with very concise code. So just a single line would be adequate in order to perform your test. Any questions? All of you are familiar with where to download your Tomcat or Visual Studio from? How many of you have .NET background? And again, we wouldn't be doing any .NET specific or Java specific.
Welcome to GoToMeeting. There are 12 other callers on the call.
All of you can go on mute. Maybe in an email, if you guys can send me what you want to work with, whether it is Visual Studio or Eclipse and Tomcat, I'll send you the links this evening, you can use that link to download it. But setting up Tomcat should be straightforward. It is just a zip file. Extract the zip file somewhere onto your local folder. And if you have Eclipse, I think we can do all of these examples. Yeah. So today's session was more of an introductory session to give you an overview of the web, since majority of you didn't have that background, and start off with JQuery. Tomorrow's session we'll deep dive into JQuery. We will do some examples and stuff. And with tomorrow's session, I think we would be able to wrap it up. If we have the same 3 or 4 hour session tomorrow, I think we should be able to wrap up JQuery. And if you guys want me to do some specific examples on presenting different kinds of information or how to manipulate pages, let me know. We can definitely do those. Okay, so if you guys don't have any questions, we'll call it a day for today. Tomorrow we'll meet at 2 o'clock. Don't forget to send that email to Prasad regarding whether you are going to work with Tomcat or Visual Studio. Okay, Prasad. Hello. Okay, so I think all of us can drop off. I'm going to stop the GoToMeeting session. So
Do we have a session tomorrow at 2, you said?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't decide on a time, but I was thinking of 2 o'clock.
Okay.
Is that a problem?
Yeah, I mean, I was not, I didn't know that we had a session tomorrow.
Okay. Or I mean, it doesn't have to be at 2 o'clock tomorrow. If you can let Prasad know, whatever is convenient for you guys, we can have it.
Anyway, you are recording the session.